Something had shifted. That was the only way I could phrase it. The house was still house, but the feeling of having arrived just behind someone else, the feeling of late, was stronger. I tried the landline again. I pulled the drawer open for a flashlight and found it. And the beam struck the backsplash and made a coin of light on the tile. I clicked it off. A flashlight makes you powerful and visible at the same time. I could feel him in the backyard even without looking, not because of a sound, but because of the way the curtains felt on my fingers when I touched them, how charged the fabric seemed, like it would spark if I rubbed it. I kept moving because motion was the only sense that felt like mine. Every window I closed, every latch I slid, opened something else in me. If he wanted me to run in circles, I would run them until I carved a groove so deep he fell into it. When it happened without theater. I had just stepped into the mud room to check the little window above the show rack when the back door, the one I checked twice, the one with the security latch, moved against its frame with the smallest inward inhale, like someone outside had leaned and their weight had made the wood remember air. It didn't open. It sighed, and then lay still. It was 2 feet away and felt my skin ripple, with hot and cold at once. The bat was in my left hand, but switched into my right because I remember reading somewhere that most people will expect you to be right-hand dominant. Then I realized how stupid that thought was. As if this were a chess match, I stepped close enough to see the thin line of outside along the weather stripping. Go away, I said, and heard how small it sounded, and wished immediately to take the words back so I wouldn't have to hear them again in my head later, replayed with shame. The only thing left to do was leave, draw the front, cut across the neighbor's yard, sprint a block to the O'Leary's, where Mrs. O'Leary's keeps the porch light on all night for her cats. I will take the sidewalk where the street lights work and use my legs the way I never did in gym. I could almost see it, the escape, the relief, the story I'll get to tell with a shaking laugh tomorrow. I padded back through the dining room with my bat at my side. As I passed the entryway, the lamp went dark. I lunged for the front door, flipped the bottom lock, turned the deadbolt, and yanked it open. Night rushed in like a crowd, cold, leaf-smelling, too big. It took one step over the threshold and saw the porch, empty, the street empty. And then, at the exact edge of my vision to the right, the pale oval of the mask. Not on the lawn, close the siding. A presence unfolded from the shadows the way a trick with paper becomes a bird. I jerked backward and slammed the door, and my shoulder throbbed with the impact. My breath looped high in my chest where it couldn't be used. I locked everything again so fast I saw my own hands as strangers. I could hear him on the porch boards, then not. I could see him in sidelight, then not. He moved like he knew furniture and angles the way I knew my own house. I backed out the stairs because up still felt like a verb I could own. On the 5th step, I heard the powder room window whispers the way leaves whispers in a small wind. I pivoted and found myself staring down the side hall and the curtain that lifted once and fell. Stop, I said, and it was unclear who I meant. Him or the night, or the version of me that kept believing she could fix this by sealing edges. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my socks slipping on the wood, my knee banging as I cuffed myself on the banister. In my room, I grabbed my phone from under the bed and tried to call 911, even though there was no service, because you had to try. The call failed. The failure sat there like a blank card. I opened my closet for no reason except that closets feel like a plan when you have none. The bed felt heavier now, like it had soaked up my fear through my palms. In the quiet, an old part of my brain began to offer me other stories to choose from. Maybe my parents had come home and gone right back out again. Maybe they'd forgotten to tell me. Maybe they had staged some kind of test, though they would never. Maybe the mask was not a person, but an object in the yard catching the light. Maybe the open door had been me, forgetful, and then I remembered the resistance at the hinge. And then I remembered the resistance at the hinge and the apple on the floor. There are moments when the world insists you step out of the kinder narrative. This was one of them. I let the bed touch the floor, and it made a small, ordinary sound. Ordinary sounds are the strangest when you are not living an ordinary moment. The footfalls come at last, not dramatic, not heavy, just sure. The staircase registered them as different from mine, not because of weight, but because of patience. One step, pause, another step, pause. He didn't need to rush. Rushing is what you do when you fear the scene will change before you get there. I moved to my door and put my ear to it. I could hear the breath of the house, the small clicked syllable of the heat turning on, and beneath it the hush of someone who understands what listening buys. I slid the lock on my door into place even though it would do almost nothing. When the footsteps reached the top, they didn't turn toward me. They continued down the hall toward my parents' room. That was not the way stories go. I felt a flare of something like insult and opened my door a slit and peered out. The hall was a river of dim. At the far end, the shadow of a shoulder slipped into my parents' doorway. The mask turned a fraction, as if to calibrate the dark. Then he was inside their room, and the small sounds that followed were drawers politely opening, politely closing. I stepped into the hall and felt the rush of doing a thing fear told me not to do. My bare feet were silent on the carpet. I moved along the wall, where the nightlight turned my skin to something that didn't belong to me. At my parents' doorway, I held the bat like an argument I intended to win and leaned my head around the jump. He had his back to me, which seemed impossible. The mask was white as a page, the hood of his sweatshirt up around it, the color nondescript, the way an eraser is nondescript. He was looking into the dresser mirror, not at the drawers, as if the act of reflection itself were the point, as if he were studying himself inside our life. The mirror caught me too, a small slice of pale face, eyes wide. And he must have seen that because he went very still, a stillness so deep it felt like more silence had been breathed into the room. Then his head turned into the mirror, not in reality. The mask looked at me in glass. I had the sensation of falling without moving. I stepped backward, and the hall accepted me like a mouth accepts a word. He came after me without haste. That was somehow worse than speed. I pivoted to run, felt the old carpet under my toes, tried to hold me back with its fat loops. I reached my room, went in, slammed the door, dragged the desk chair to wedge under the knob. And he was there on the other side, testing the lock with a polite pressure that said, "This is well made for what it is, and also insufficient." I backed toward the window. There was a drop the porch roof, not far, but enough to break something if you did it wrong. He tried the knob again and the chair creaked. "Please," I said, which is the oldest word, and hated it. He stopped. The quiet had weighed. Then he let the door be and the sound of his footstep moved away. I held the bed up because my arms didn't know what else to do. The hall outside my room brightened and fraction. As if another light had come on somewhere, I waited for him to return the way you wait for thunder after the lightning has already counted you. I made a plan because plans keep your mind from chewing itself. I would open the window, climb onto porch roof, swing down to railing of the front steps, and drop to the ground. I would sprint to block to the O'Learys and rattle the door until old Mrs. O'Leary's, who sleeps with the TV on, came to save me just by being someone else in the world. I went to the window and unlatched it and pushed it up. The night came in with its leaf smell and its low sounds of someone's sprinkler far away making rain where there wasn't any. I put one leg over the sill. Then from the hall I heard my name, not a shout, not a call, a question mark version of it, like my mom when she wants to know if I'm awake yet. Katie! The voice was hers, absolutely hers. I froze with one knee on the sill, my hands on the frame, the plant evaporating like warm breath on glass. Mom, I said back before I could stop myself. The use of the word felt like throwing something valuable down a well. The silence that followed wasn't quite silence anymore. It had the shape of something listening to me say what I had said. It's okay, she said, and the way she said okay was two parts. The first syllable a soft landing, the second like a little laugh because she always laughs when she needs you to relax. So you'll hear the laugh instead of the worry. We came back and then we had to step out again. The voice went on, and I could see her mouth forming the words and the lines around her eyes. My mom who hates lies because of how they make the rest of the day feel heavier. Open up, please. The doorknob turned and the chair under it nudged forward half an inch. Something inside me that was older than remembering told me not to answer. Something inside me that was a child said, "Your mother is on the other side of that door." "Where is Dad?" I asked. My voice sounded like a new person trying out our part. "He's downstairs," she said, with a little smile in the sound of it. "He got something from the car. Honey, please." The knob turned again, firmer, and the chair squeaked. My mom never calls me honey when we are in the middle of a not quite fight. She calls me kiddo, or she says my full name like a warning but soft. It was a small thing, but small things are the exact shape of truth. I didn't answer. The knob stilled. Then came three soft knocks, and on the third knock the rhythm changed like someone remembering they should pretend better. I did not breathe. The knock stopped. I counted to 30 in my head, then to 60, then lost count. I lowered my leg back into the room and the window stayed open because I wanted it that way. Not an escape anymore, but a fact that disagreed with the other facts. When I finally moved, I moved toward the desk and pulled the drawer with the sticky track and got the small spray bottle of cleaner my mom keeps for quick dust. It was a stupid weapon, but I needed to put something in my left hand besides air. In my right, the bat. In my chest, a drum that sounded like me and someone else. I opened my door. The chair scraped. The hall was empty. Light from my parents' room spilled a stripe across the carpet. I went toward it because that was where the story wanted me to go. I stepped into their room and found it as I had left it, except for one new thing. The mask lay on the dresser in front of the mirror, turned face up, an empty white that made the rest of the room look over-decorated. The sight of it, without a head under it, did a strange thing to my fear, flattened it like a hand smoothing a wrinkle. I approached. In the mirror, my face was a face I recognized, but the way the light fell on my eyes made them look older, or like someone else's eyes had moved into mine. I reached toward the mask and didn't touch it. The closet door was ajar an inch. The inch was an essay. I kept my eyes on the mirror and in the mirror. Saw the closet door edge shift a hair, as if something behind it and leaned in to hear me think. I didn't turn. I raised the bat and brought it down hard on the mask. Not because the mask had done anything, but because smashing it would make a sound that belonged to me. The crack was sharp and mean, a hairline fracture, split the oval into two unequal halves. For a moment, nothing. Then the closet door eased wider. I pivoted and swung, not at a person, there was no one there, but at air that felt occupied. The bat hit the door frame and sent a shock up my arms that made me wince. I stepped back, bat up. The closet smelled like cheddar and my dad's aftershave and the plastic of dry cleaner bags. I took one more step back and felt, with my bare heel, the smallest breeze, as if someone had opened a window behind me. I turned. The window in my parents' room, which had been shut, was open an inch now. The curtains had not moved. I crossed the room and slammed it, and slid the lock and held it with both hands, as if I could lock my own skin. On the dresser, next to the broken holes of the mask, lay a single folded piece of paper that had not been there, but that must have been, because how else? And I knew I was making deals with myself again. I unfolded it. It was a page torn from my dad's book downstairs, the corner marked with the grocery receipt. On it, in pencil, was written, "We live here too." I did not scream. Screaming felt like giving something away. I folded the note back alone, its torn edge, and slid into my hoodie pocket, because possession makes the world real. I left my parents' room and walked the hall like a person who had decided to be a person again. In my room, I closed the window and latched it. In the powder room, I latched the window and pressed my fingertips along the seam. In the kitchen, I turned off the light. In the living room, I turned off the lamp. At the entryway, I bent and zipped my backpack fully and lifted it to my shoulder and felt the ordinary weight of school. I stood in the dark and listened. The house made its house sounds. My lungs made their breath somewhere on the other side of the front door. The porch boards made a small complaint, as if someone had shifted weight. "I know," I said, barely aloud, and surprised myself with the calm. "I know." At 11:18, headlights swung across the blinds. A car door closed. Two voiced my parents, the sound of their lagging rhythm, the soft jostle of keys, the step, the step. The deadbolt turned under my father's hand and stopped, because I had locked the bottom too. His case slid in, turned, the door opened. Light from the porch met the dark and lost. "Katie!" My mom called with the exact music of my name that the false voice had tried to sing. I stood at the edge of the living room, half in shadow, the bed low at my side, the note heavy in my pocket. "You left all the lights on?" my dad asked the dark, confused but gentle. I stepped forward into the spill of light and said, "You were late." The way their faces changed from evening to very open something in me that had been clenched for an hour that spanned years. I did not cry. I did not explain. "There's a problem with the phone," I said instead, calm as a list. "And I think someone's been in the yard." My dad's eyes cut past me to the windows. My mom's hand found my elbow with the urgency of belief. We walked the house together. We checked the latches, the locks. My dad stepped onto the porch and scanned the yard with his phone's flashlight and came back with the uncommitted shrug men wear when they don't want to scare you more than you already are. "Maybe a raccoon," he offered, helplessly. "Maybe a prank," he added. More helpless still, I could have told him about the mask or the hand on my door or the note in my pocket. I did not. The note warmed against my thigh like an ember. My mom made tea because tea is the bandage for everything in our house. We sat on the couch like we do when storms pass close by and we wait for the weather to decide about us. The house looked like our house again, which is the most reliable trick a house knows. When they went to bed, I stayed a little longer on the couch, listening. At some point, I slid the note out of my pocket and unfolded it and placed it under the lamp. The pencil looked ordinary and human. "We live here too." I turned the lamp off and let the dark return to its precise shape around me. Upstairs, a floorboard breathed. It might have been the heat. It might have been the other people who live in our house and prefer not to be seen. I picked up the bat and the apple from the floor in the kitchen and carried both up with me like offerings. In my room, I set the bat by the door, set the apple on the window sill, and lay down on the top of the covers in my hoodie and jeans and stared at the ceiling until my eyes stopped making shapes out of nothing. I slept the kind of sleep you buy with fear, full of shallow dreams and a single deep one I can't remember. In the morning, the apple was gone. There was no core, no wet spot, no joke. I didn't tell my parents because what will I ask them to do with the knowledge except carry it? On my way to school, I tucked the note into the little free library at the end of our street between two copies of books you are supposed to like. When I let it go, I felt an answer in my bones, a tiny shift, a yes from the quiet walls. It was in its way a relief to know that the lesson had ended, that the night had taught what it came to teach, that I had learned it, how to move inside a space that is yours and not yours, how to close a window and keep another open, how to be the kind of afraid that doesn't kneel. And when I cut across the baseball diamond after last period, shoulder sore where the bat had rested all night, I realized I had started to listen differently to the world. Not for screams, but for the polite sounds quiet things make when they want you to know they are there.